Good morning, folks. It is 10:30 a.m. here in Australia, Gold Coast, Australia. I'm having a good day because my coffee mug always says so. No bad days. And how can you have a bad day with that? And a nice cup of coffee. But what would be even better if my doorbell rang? There it is. I wonder who that is. Ladies and gentlemen, none other than Mr. Oz Noy. Hey, Oz, how are you, buddy?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Mate, thank you so much for joining me. We're running a little bit late today, but we're musicians. We do that.
Yeah, sorry. I spaced out.
That's okay, man. You said you went for a bit of a run.
Yeah, but I've been doing some sessions here. I did some recordings here. And, usually I do some tracks and, then I have to comp them, edit them. So I need to take a break. I can't just do it right away. So I do a bunch of recordings, then I either go out for a run or do something. So I just spaced out. I was like, I may go for a run and come back and finish it. Then,
That's okay, mate. For a second, I thought you'd forgotten about me, but we're here.
I just swim.
I'm going to start where I always start with people, and that's asking them.
Hold on 1 second.
Yeah.
I got to say something. The ADA and the Marshall behind you, I grew up playing those things. I love those things. I grew up having those two preamps forever when I was in Israel.
Yeah.
I love those things. I like to get those back again just for the fuck of it.
Yeah, totally. So I was always an ADA guy myself, all through the 90s.
Yeah, I used to have ADA forever.
Yeah. And I got that recently. I did a jingle for somebody. I do jingles and things. And as a contra deal, I knew they had one. I said, hey, I'll fucking have your ADA.
Yeah.
I tell you what, man, I've played a lot of really nice amplifiers since then, and it's not what I remembered it to be. There's a scratchiness about it. And I always wanted to compare it to the Marshall JMP1, and I borrowed that off a friend just recently. And I'm thinking I like that. I've got over here, right beside it, an angle cab loader. These things are really cool. So
that's pretty cool. Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's an impulse response.
Cabinets thing, yeah.
Yeah. So between the two of those, just for direct recording, it's been great. And I might build a little live rig out of the two of those.
So do you like the Marshall better than the ADA?
I'm going to have to do a really extensive test, and I'm going to. I'm going to do a video comparing the two of them. That's the version 1 ADA. I think mine was they had a version 2, which was...
that's the good one. The 1 is the one to have.
It is the one. That they came out with an MP2. That's not what I'm talking about. These came out in several versions. This is the very first version. They came out with one, like a version 1.2 or something, that was a little bit quieter. And just the access, there's a little dip switch on the top. Did yours have a switch on the top to change between live?
Remember.
You don't remember?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm dying to get one to hear how it sounds now. I'm really curious.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, man. Subscribe to my YouTube channel and you will see a comparison of the two very soon.
Wow.
Yeah. What I am liking about the JMP1 is the fact that it's got a dial, so that I can actually turn the dial to adjust the parameters.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was always the thing with these, was you'd be live.
I know.
Yeah, and you'd have your preset, you're thinking, oh man, I just need a little bit more presence. And you'd go to adjust the presence, and you'd have to change the patch before you got a chance.
The only thing I remember about the Marshall one is that, because I used the ADA for a bunch of years, like a lot actually. And I remember when I tried a Marshall, I remember it had that Marshall sound that I really liked, but it sounded really small. It was kind of small sounding. That's the only thing I remember. I think at some point that's why I sold it. I got rid of it because of that. But I know that Billy Gibbons was using that for a long time as his main thing. So,
Yep.
But
then again, Billy Gibbons uses 7-gauge strings as well, and listen to him. What a motherfucker.
But see how he sounds after all of that. It sounds like God still,
It's all in his hands. It's all on the fingers, folks. It's all on the fingers.
It's on the fingers, but he knows how to do it too. You have to know how to tweak the stuff to your specifications, I guess. You know?
I think so. I think so.
But anyhow, ask questions. That was just very.
So no, that's fine, man. That's fine. It's cool because people are generally looking at the gear I have behind me, and people always say, "Hey, what's that guitar? What's that guitar?" And I've got some cool ones there.
Yeah.
What I wanted to ask you, and how I usually start the conversation, mate, is how did the love affair with the guitar start for you?
I was 10 years old. I think I started to listen to the Beatles before, but I actually wanted to play drums. I was kind of hitting pots and pans.
Yep.
And my mom actually was already looking for a drum teacher for me. And then I had a friend of mine in school. I don't know, maybe I forgot what. I was 10 years old, so. And he told me, "Hey, I'm studying guitar. Come and see a lesson." So I went to the lesson with him. I don't remember it being exciting or anything, but I just started going to take guitar lessons. And I actually remember that the first couple of lessons, I wasn't even into it. I remember I wasn't really digging practicing or anything. It was kind of boring. It wasn't really exciting. But then my big brother started to play the bass. And he had a band, like a high school band. Actually, it was really a middle school band. But he had a friend of his that was like the kind of the singer in the band. And he used to come to our house and play songs, like Beatles songs and some Israeli pop songs. And then he starts playing those chords. And I was like, oh, wow, this is cool. So I started playing that. And that really got me going. Like it was still nylon string guitar. But then my dad got this really crappy bass amp for my brother that he can play bass. And then he got me this weird pickup that kind of glues to the nylon string guitar, but then I can plug it into the bass amp. And once I open and crank volume and I play the chords, I was like, okay, well, that's more like it.
Cool.
So that was pretty much it. After that, you know, I just kept going. But I don't remember anything really exciting about it at all. I think only when I started to get into, you know, like chords and solos and like Beatles stuff and, you know, like there was a lot of really good Israeli pop kind of rock stuff going on at the time. So I really dug that, you know. Cool.
So just things on the radio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the really interesting thing is, I don't know why, but my brother started to bring jazz records home. So, you know, McLaughlin, Aldi Meola, Chick Corea, Keith Jarrett, that kind of stuff. And I remember, I think the first jazz concert I ever went to see was McLaughlin. He came and he played a trio with Jonas Helsberg, the bass player.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that really freaked me out because he was playing so fast at the time on an acoustic guitar. And that really grabbed me. I think between that and that record, Friday Night in San Francisco, you know, that record with Paco de Lucia and Aldi Meola and McLaughlin, that was like one of the greatest shred record of all times. Like they play so fast, you know. That stuff got me hooked, you know.
Cool. And that got you down the path of the shred style, I guess, then, huh?
Yeah, it wasn't shred. I was never a shredder, although I grew up in the 80s, so I tried to do it. So I was doing tapping. I was playing fast, but I was never a really great shredder. I could never really figure out the Steve Vai stuff or the Van Halen stuff. I always played jazz. So I was playing jazz, I was playing heavy rock at the same time, but I always did studio work and played pop music since I'm really young. That was kind of my luck. So pretty much from the age of 14 or 15 till I left Israel and moved to New York when I was 24, and till this day I do session work. So
cool.
I played on a lot of pop stuff, you know, growing up. So it was great to have the chops, you know what I mean, to play rock and all that stuff. But I was always into the studio kind of, you know, thing. So although I grew up in the 80s, I tried to have the 80s sound with the whole thing. But my luck was that I was able to do a recording session and play with pop singers in Israel, like some big pop stars, you know.
Nice.
Yeah. And at the same time, I always played jazz. So I always played, like I studied jazz and I played jazz. So it was always like I had split personality. I had like two personalities going at the same time.
Okay. So just having a bit of a peek online at some videos on YouTube of you, you're very knowledgeable of the fretboard. Like I saw some videos of you describing how you approach either this way diagonally or up and down or backwards.
Yeah.
Where did the knowledge of the fretboard come for you?
I guess practicing always, and I gotta say that I never practiced technique. You know what I mean? I did practice technique for a very short time in the 80s because I got some of those, like Paul Gilbert and like Greg Howe and all those videos. What was it? HR.
Yeah, I know the ones.
So I had those and I was practicing some of that stuff, but it was for a pretty short time. And I think my luck was that I always played jazz and I got heavily into bebop. So at some point I always tried to practice stuff that actually is more music than technique. Mm-hmm. So I think that helped the knowledge of the fretboard because you have to find everything in different positions, The whole thing about 3 notes, 4 notes, 2 notes, that whole kind of, I call it directional playing, that came much later. Like, I think I figured that out in the last couple of years, I was practicing stuff like that, and I think some of it did come from heavy metal, like from the era of the 80s. Mm-hmm. But I didn't think about it as rock. I thought about it more as like opening the neck, different directions. So that's pretty much I guess that's how it came about. But I think most of the fretboard knowledge came from just practicing jazz. It wasn't practicing patterns like rock patterns,
And you said you started off doing the session work very early.
Yeah, very.
What kind of lessons do you think that taught you at a young age?
Well, first of all, because I grew up in Israel, and there is great players in Israel, but the overall level when I was growing up wasn't that high, So it wasn't like I was one of the top session players in Israel, but I played on a fair amount of recordings and a couple of big records. And I guess if I would be there for longer, I would probably do much more work. But the main thing that it taught me when I was really young is how to play with a click. Because if you don't have time, you can't play. You can't do studio work. Period. Mm-hmm. And the better your time is, the better studio player you're going to be. So that's the first thing. The second thing was probably have some approach to sounds, to guitar sounds. And the third thing is probably know when to play and when not to play, which is something that you always learn. Even now, it's always hard. Like Miles always said that, like what is it? I forgot how he said it, but the silent is music too. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And that's a pretty hard thing to be okay with, especially when you do studio work. So it's I think of all of it as one thing. Whether you play on somebody's song or you play a solo for somebody or you play on a jazz, it's all the same thing for me. I don't know.
It's funny that you should say that you started out thinking that you wanted to play the drums, because that seems to be a common thing with people that I've been talking to. And I was the same. I used to see film clips and watch the drummer. It's like, oh, they've got their hands crossed over. Yeah, I could see what they're doing there. And I started out playing the organ, and it had a drum machine built into it. So I used to mess around with that and you said playing to a click from an early age. I guess I was playing to a drum machine, and that got me fascinated with the technology side of things. Yep. But things like that, I think, really build you towards being a great rhythm guitarist, which, like you said, is a big part of the job, especially in the studio world. Most of the time, you're not taking big solos.
If you're a rhythm guitar player, you're going to work for the rest of your life, pretty much.
Absolutely.
I grew up in the 80s, so the whole shred thing was pretty exciting to me. So I try to stick it everywhere, even when I play pop artists and stuff. But my luck was that I always had, somehow probably from doing studio work in a really young age, I always had really, like, not really good time. I always had good time. So I got into rhythm guitar more like once I started to be aware of like James Brown and Stevie Wonder and Prince and people like that. And that was in my early 20s maybe.
Okay.
And then I got into it pretty heavily, you know. So I remember when I moved to New York, it was 96, and I was 24. One of the first gigs that I've done, I remember it clearly because there was a guy named Arnie Lawrence, saxophone player, that he used to go back and forth from Israel to New York, and he started the New School in New York. He was a pretty heavy saxophone player. He played with like Dizzy Gillespie and a lot of people like that. And he had these gigs that were kind of like all jams, but he would get great players. So when I moved to New York, he already knew me from Israel. And he called me to do this one gig. And I remember I was going to the gig, and the drummer on that gig was Aaron Comes. He's the drummer for the Spin Doctors.
Oh, cool.
And he's a really great drummer. So I remember we played a set. And at the end of the set, he goes like, man, you got really good time. You play really good rhythm. And that's what really grabs people. You know, the whole soloing thing, it's important to some degree, but if you have good time and you play good rhythm, you're in business, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I think even after that, there's a bunch of, I think that really grabs a lot of people's attention. If you play really good rhythm guitar, you know, at some point, look, when you do studio work or you do pop gigs and stuff, rhythm guitar is the most essential thing, really. Like the soloing is really secondary, you know?
And
so,
even then, I find in a session situation, you talk about, you know, learning the shred and all that. And sometimes you have this need as a guitar player to show off that you can do that. But I find if I'm doing sessions for people, no, they're just singing me a melody and just go, no, forget that bullshit. Just play this. And they'll sing me a nice melody. So a lot of that goes straight over people's heads.
It's very challenging. It's like, I really love songwriting. I always loved songwriting. That's actually my favorite thing, is great songs, you know? And, you know, Tom Petty has been writing hits for years and years and years that are 3 chords, you know? Well, like, I don't know, a lot of the Beatles stuff actually harmonically is very advanced, but it's not advanced in a jazz kind of way. It's just, you know, but still, you know, if you listen to songs by, I don't know, George Harrison and stuff, it's pretty simple stuff. And then you hear, I don't know, either Mike Campbell or him playing like those really melodic solos. That's the hardest thing to do.
Absolutely.
By far, like to nail a little solo like that or a line like that, man. And that's the goal. That's where the money is. You know, like that's why people call you to a session, to just get that vibe. You know, they don't really care if you play, you know, 4-note on per string tapping or whatever.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep. So going back to your early days in Israel, do you remember what your first guitar was? Your first serious guitar? Yeah. What was it?
Oh, my first serious guitar?
Well, what did you look? You said you had like a classical that you put a pickup on.
I had a 9-string guitar that I still have in my dad's house, and it's whoever made that guitar needs to be hanged, because it's so awful. Like the neck is that thick, and it's horrible. It's like a crime. It needs to, you know. And I started on it as a kid, so I don't even know how I barred the chords. It's like the worst neck I've ever played, and my dad still has it in the house, you know. So that was the first guitar, and then I got some kind of copy of a Les Paul that one time I did a gig at a high school with some friends, and it fell and completely broke to pieces, you know. After that, you know, the first real guitar that I had was a Ibanez, one of those Roadstars, you know, with 2 humbuckers.
Yep.
So that was the first one, and then after that I got a Charvel. That was a big deal, like you know what I mean? That was when the Charvel thing was big. I remember Tina Turner at the time was the biggest thing, and her guitar player used to play a Charvel. Yep. He was a great guitar player. I don't know his name, and I was like, oh man, this is the thing, you know?
Did it have a pointy headstock?
Yeah,
it did. Yeah.
Yeah, it was the Charvels from the 80s, you know, from that time. That was the, you know, that was the guitar. Yeah. You know, actually, something really interesting is I have two childhood friends of mine in Israel that each of them has that one of those guitars. One has my Ibanez and one has my Charvel.
Cool.
Yeah. I'm not really in touch with them, but a couple of years ago they sent me a photo of both of those guitars because they're still friends. And every time I go to Israel, I try to meet them, but it never happens because I want to see the guitars again, you know?
Yep, absolutely. That's so cool. And what about amps? What did you play through as an amp back then?
Ooh, that was rough. Ooh. I think, let me think about this. I think there was some Roland Cube keyboard amp that was around at the time somehow from, I don't remember how.
The silver one? Was it a silver one?
Yeah, the silver one. Yeah,
that was my first amp experience. In the high school that I went to had one of those, and I was playing through that. So no distortion, just clean with a bit of reverb. Yeah. That was my introduction too.
I don't remember reverb or anything. So that was that, and then I got it somehow. There's those Yamaha amps that are all plastic, Yamaha XL something, horrendous sounding amp. So I had all those different versions. Like I had a small one, a bigger one, another big one. And those I played for a long time. But those were like amps that were like for home or for little gigs. Once I got more professional and had to go do real gigs, then I got my first real amp was the Laney Head.
Nice.
And a 210 cabinet with Fane speakers. Those are great speakers, by the way.
Okay.
That was the first thing, and after that I bought an ADA, and I used the power amp of the Laney, and after that I started to buy, like those stereo power amps and use the ADA with that, and then I used the Marshall with that, and then at some point I became an adult and I got a Marshall JCM 900. Mm-hmm. That was when I was already kind of doing some real professional work, I guess. And then I got a twin reverb with those black knobs. You know, they used to have red knobs and black knobs.
Uh-huh.
Actually, that one with the black knobs, I actually sent that one to New York. I had it in New York.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So those were the main amps that I used till I moved to New York. You know.
It's funny you said you got a real amp. You got the Marshall. I can remember back in the day, back in the 90s, and I had my little ADA rig. I used to use a quadriverb for effects for that.
Oh, I used a quadriverb too.
Yeah, we had this very similar rigs. What power amp did you have?
Ooh, I know my dream was to have the Boogie Stereo 9095, whatever it was.
Yep.
It was my dream, but it was so expensive to get that in Israel. It cost like a fortune. So I never was able to get it. I think I had some really crappy PV stereo amp, and then I had some other weird little things that all sounded like ass, really.
Yeah.
They sounded thin and not good at all. And then I had those EV speakers. My dream was to get a Triaxis and a stereo 95, like Boogie left and right, and those two Boogie cabinets. That was my dream.
That was
rig.
The dream, yeah.
Maybe now is the time to get that.
All right, mine. I had a solid state power amp, Carver.
I think I had a Carver for a minute.
150 watts a side, and I ran two Marshall quad boxes with that. They were the valve state boxes, but man, that was my rig all through the 90s.
I had that thing.
Wow, we had identical rigs. How about that?
Here's what else I remember. I remember having Carvin for a minute. I had the Carvin preamp and power amp.
Okay. Now, mine was a Carver, not Carvin.
No, I know. I had that Carver. I know what that is.
Yeah.
You know what? Maybe I didn't. I can't remember. I remember it pretty clearly. I don't know if I think I had it for a minute. Yeah.
So I loved that rig. It was just one little 4-unit rack space.
Yeah, that's what I had. Same thing.
Yeah, and just in an SKB case, so I could just take that with me everywhere. That was the rig of the day. And man, the only thing I didn't like, as I said before, was not being able to adjust things on the fly, having to go in and press menus and things. But apart from that, I had my sounds dialed, and MIDI all the way. Just press a button. None of this tap dancing.
Yeah, I had the MIDI controller from the ADA. And
Yep. They were terrible. The buttons on those would just fuck up all the time.
You're right.
Yeah.
It's so funny to talk about. I haven't thought about it or talked about it since, I don't know.
But they were all the rage. I can remember seeing them in all the magazines, and I talked about it.
I remember that Paul Gilbert was a big ADA user, and you can hear it on a lot of those recordings. You just hear that ADA sound. I think it's ADA, at least from, it might be just a Marshall at the end of the day. But to me, some of that stuff really sounds like an ADA, especially when you listen to that instructional video of his. You can really hear that sound. And you're like, oh, that's that ADA.
Yeah,
that stereo chorus is really good. No, the ADA stereo chorus is great. No,
I want to go back to using a rack, and I want to get the Synergy rack. You aware of the Synergy with the modules? Yep.
Yeah.
I want to get one of those, but keep the ADA for the solid state clean with the analog chorus, because that is a beautiful sound.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I find. Digital chorus just isn't the same as an analog. I've got one of those Arion, like Landau uses, and whenever I buy a digital unit, I put the two side by side, and the chorus on that little plastic pedal just makes anything digital sound stupid. Like, is this even on? Yeah, it just doesn't have that thickness.
Well, that was the 80s. Everything was kind of like this digitalized, not digital like now, but more, thin and processed.
So fast forward to 96, moved to New York at 24.
Yeah.
What kind of gear did you didn't bring the gear with you, did you? Or did you? No.
I brought my Strat. When I moved to New York, I brought my Strat that I had for years. I sold it a long time ago. I had like a 62 reissue Strat it's kind of like wood color. Mm-hmm. And it had lace sensor pickups in it, actually, believe it or not. That I actually loved. I always loved those pickups. I've done a bunch of stuff with it. But anyhow, I brought that, and I brought a 175 Gibson.
All right.
Because I was playing jazz. I still play jazz, but at the time I was playing it on a hollow body. And then that's it. And then I bought a Silverface 70s deluxe amp from a friend. And that was it. And then at some point, my parents or somehow somebody brought me my Music Man Van Halen model that I still have and I still use. Those guitars, unbelievably good.
Wow.
Yeah, the thing is one of the greatest guitars on the planet. And I have it and I still use it sometimes. And then what happened? Yeah, you have a question about the
I was going to say about the Music Man. A friend of mine, they opened for Van Halen back in early 90s, and he was given one by Eddie Van Halen. And so this is, I can remember the early 90s, and this is my friend Dave Leslie from the band The Baby Animals.
Yep.
They opened for Unlawful Carnal Knowledge tour for Van Halen. Them and Alice in Chains, I think, were the two bands that did the different legs of the tour. Was given one by Eddie, and he came to my place for a jam one time, and he brought that. So it was a genuine Music Man from Eddie, and a Washburn N4 that was personally Nuno's as well, because the singer of his band was married to Nuno Betancourt for many years. So there I was as a teenage kid, or late teens, sitting in my bedroom with one of my guitar idols at the time, with a genuine guitar that was given to him by Eddie Van Halen and another one by Nuno. And I was just like, this is fucking crazy. Is this for real?
Actually, I remember when I bought the Music Man guitar, I was still in Israel, and I wanted to get a guitar on that kind of style.
Yep. And
I was trying to decide between the Nuno guitar, the Van Halen guitar, the Music Man guitar, and the Valiart Steve Lukather guitar.
I had a Valiart.
And I decided to go with the Van Halen guitar, with a Music Man guitar, which I'm so happy because, that guitar is still holding up. Like, it's still as great as, it's kind of a really weird one-off instrument that is just extraordinary. I still use it sometimes. I have to play a really heavy, kind of like a modern rock solo. Yeah. I used it, I think, the other day on something. It's great.
Cool. I had a Valley Arts as well. I had just a standard Pro, but some of the other standard Pros I've seen weren't of the quality of this. So I'm not too sure of the history of them, but this was one of the handmade in LA ones. I sold it. A guy hassled me for many years to sell it, and I did a few years ago. I'm going to hit him up and see if he wants to sell it back to me, because I really want to get a Strat style guitar with a Floyd Rose on it again.
And EMGs and stuff.
Yeah, I'm not so sold on the EMGs in it. I'd probably put something different in it now. Yeah, absolutely. So you're a Strat man through and through these days, so aren't you? Yeah. Because
I have a Les Paul and I have Teles and stuff. Like, I have other guitars, but my main guitar is like a Strat and a Tele. Although I've been using, on my last couple of records, I've been using a Les Paul for a bunch of stuff. A lot, really? Actually. Yep. Yeah, and also I even use a Gretsch for a couple of things, you know?
Yep. I was going to say that a lot of the Strats that you play, is that someone at your door?
No, it's my phone. Hold on one second.
I can hold on.
Let me just make sure I turn this off.
That's fine. I'm just going to cut to my little room here so people can see all my beautiful guitars. Got some nice ones. Oh, it's all backwards.
Yeah.
I've had that one there for a long time.
Hopefully it's not going to call me.
That's okay. So I was going to ask you about the Strats. They look like they're very old Strats, or are they relics?
I've been using custom shops forever. I can't afford, I have really kind of expensive taste when it comes, like, if I play vintage guitars, the ones that I really like are the ones that are just extraordinary, you know what I mean? So I'm not going to put 20 or 30 grand on a guitar. It's not even if I had the money and I would do it, you can't tour with it. You can't really do any fret work or anything. It's just not making sense for me. And I'm not into having a guitar that I'm not going to use regularly. Like, a guitar to me is something that you have to use all the time.
Yeah.
So if the vintage guitars were reasonably priced, I would have only vintage guitars, but they're not. So it's kind of frustrating, but it is what it is, it's just like, so I had several custom shop Strats that actually Fender made for me. And recently, the latest upgrades that I've done was, I really like John Cruz's work. And he's a kind of a friend of mine. He's like the master builder. And I have 3 of his guitars. I have 2 Teles and 1 Strat. This Strat is his. And they're really, really good. They feel and look like old guitars. I don't think they sound probably as good as a real good old guitar, but they sound really, really good, and they really have that kind of old kind of feel. So let's put it like that. It's good enough for me. If those vintage guitars wouldn't be crazy expensive, I would only have that. But the other thing that I don't like also is sometimes you can find those vintage guitars that are players. But I don't want to get a guitar that had a headstock broken or some little thing that took the price down. It's like, I'm not into that,
Sure. Yeah.
And the ones that are really nice, that I usually are the ones that I really like, they're a fortune, So it's like, it doesn't make sense for me to do it,
I had a genuine 1952 Tele here about a year ago, and a 52 deluxe amplifier to go with it. And I surprised my friend Louise Shelton. I'm not sure if you know of Louise Shelton. He was a studio guy, date back to the Monkees and Jackson 5, etc.
I know the name,
yeah. So he just lives around the corner from me, and I brought him over because I knew that his first guitar was a 52 Tele, and I surprised him, and I had a couple of reissues, and we had his reissue, and then I pulled out the real one and sat down and had a bit of a chat over that. So if people have a look on my channel, you'll find that, Louise Shelton and the 52 Tele. But the sound of that thing and the feel of that thing was just amazing.
I know. It's frustrating. I know I have a lot of friends that have the old stuff, and I played some really, really, really expensive guitars too. Not all of them are always amazing, but the ones that are great, it's kind of depressing, but I don't know what I'm gonna do.
What struck me about this guitar was how light it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I picked it up, it was an ash body, and I've found ash guitars could be either extremely light or extremely heavy. I've got a Richie Kotzen Stratocaster back there that I've heavily modified, that one there, and that is so fucking heavy. Like, you pick that up and it's, whoa, bricks in this side, inside this thing. But yeah, this particular 52 Tele, ridiculously light, but just the resonance, you'd play it not plugged in and play a chord on it, and it just really struck you how resonant that guitar was.
Sure.
I don't know if they were doing something different back then, or whether the wood has aged in time.
I don't know. I really don't know what it is.
But there's a mojo there. So you talked about some of the gear that you used back in the day.
Yeah.
What's your go-to these days?
So I have a couple of those John Cruz Strats. Mm-hmm. I have one Strat. It's this make. I'll show you. This is the one that I still have. That I have for a long time. It's this red one. You'll see me play it a lot.
Uh-huh.
So this is Fender made me two guitars. I kind of ordered them from them directly, and they made them to kind of, it wasn't to my specs. It's just like I wanted 60s style. So I had a rosewood one that was playing for a long time, like a 68, and this is a 68 maple, and it's great. Actually, Eric Johnson wanted to buy it from me for years. It's been like our joke for many years. So that's that. And then I have this Strat, and I have a couple of Teles. Those are all John Cruz. Then I have a Les Paul there. That's really great. I have a baritone, James Stressard baritone that I really love. I have a Gretsch Duo-Jet, the Steven Stern, actually, one of those master builds. Those are great. And I got a couple other things here, but those are the main guitars. Then I mostly play Turok amps.
Oh, really?
Either Turoks or Marshalls. So I have two old Marshalls, two Plexis. I have a 100 watt and a 50 watt Plexis. And then I have a lot of Turok amps, actually.
Really? Really? Okay.
Actually, the best thing I own in life is the Turok TS1 amp.
Nice.
Yeah, that thing is pretty extraordinary. So that's pretty much what I use. Fender amps. I have a twin head here for recording. I barely use it live, and I have like a Princeton or Deluxe and stuff. But most of what I use, if I tour or if I play live, unless it's a small gig, is Turok or Marshall.
Okay.
And I have pedals.
Okay, as you tell me about your pedals, I'm just going to go quickly take a bio break, as they call it, because I drink way too much coffee before I do this. But okay. I can still hear you. I'll be back in 30 seconds. So, about your pedals.
What's that?
I'm just going to go take a quick break while you tell us about your pedals.
Oh, but I have tons of pedals. All right, you go. I'll.
You talk away. I can still hear you.
Yeah. I have so many pedals, but I have a couple of different pedal boards, but they're all kind of the same. There's certain things that I use on all of those pedal boards. So I have this ACRC Oz, it's called. It's like a pedal that they made for me, exotic. So that's kind of one of my main booster pedals. Then I have a TS808 with an Analog Man mod that I use all the time. And then I have a Vamaram fuzz. It's called the Oz fuzz that they made for me also. So those are the three major, how do you call it, like overdrives or distortion pedals. And then I use line 6 for a lot of stuff. Like I used to use the M9 and M13, and before that I used the DL4. And now I use the HX effects that I kind of like, but I'm having a hard time with. And the rest of the stuff is just other stuff that, like I have a Leslie pedal from DSL that I use forever. Those are like the main things, and then other things on the side,
Cool. So you said you've got a few overdrives there that have got your name on them.
Yeah.
What kind of things did you specify when you were getting your own overdrive pedals?
The 808, the Ibanez 808 doesn't have my name on it. It's just like I like that sound, and Analog Man does this one really nice mode. I think it's called the Silver mode or something. So that's what I've been using. If you want that kind of twangy Stevie Ray Vaughan-ish sound. Vemura made me a fuzz pedal. There's a story behind it. The story is, I love that company. They make some of the greatest pedals ever made. So I started to use one of those Shanks fuzzes, but it never had enough gain for me. So I always asked them, can you send me one with more gain? So they kept sending me some, but it was still never. I had one that was good, and the rest of them was kind of not quite that. So one of the tours that I did in Japan, they're Japanese, so they came to the sound check, and they had this pedal. They go like, hey, we made you this pedal, try it. And I tried it, and it was fantastic. And I ended up doing the whole tour. It was the beginning of an Asian tour. I had the whole tour playing on that pedal. I even did a one gig where they didn't have a transformer for my pedal board, and I did the whole gig with that pedal.
Oh, really?
And it was fantastic, yeah. And actually, there's a live record out of that tour. It's called Asian Twist. It's me and Dave Weckel and ATN Mbappe. And you can hear that fuzz on a couple of tracks there, you know. So when I got home, at some point I just talked to them. I was like, why don't you just make it like a model, you know, with my name on it, because nobody has that fuzz. You made it for me. And they did. I have to say, it took them a while to get it right, because they use all these old parts, and I think because it's really limited, they have a limited amount of parts. So I think they only made like 400 or 500 of those pedals that I have with my name. And I think the reason for it is because if they don't have the vintage parts, and they tried to do it with parts that were not vintage, and it just didn't work. They kept showing me stuff, and I was like, no, it's not that. And then once they put everything in the right way, it sounded right. But it's expensive, and but it's fantastic. It's really great. So that's one. And then I always been an Exotic fan. Like since they started, I think Exotic is actually probably the most important company for the 21st century for guitars, because before they came out, there was no pedals in the market that were that was transparent to the sound of the guitar. They were the first company that made pedals that was transparent, like that you will push the pedal and you still hear the same sound from the guitar. So that, to my opinion, that changed the whole guitar world really since that in terms of pedals. So I used the AC into the RC. That was kind of the RC into the AC. That was my lead tone on a lot of my records, really. It still is. It is my lead tone. But at some point, I asked him if they can put it in one pedal for me, and then I also wanted more gain on the RC side, just in case. It's the same thing as what Scott Henderson pedal is. It's like Scott has this RC pedal that has a switch for more gain. So my pedal is just more gain, but on the knob you can go, like, you can go to 10 and then you can go to 20. You know what I mean?
Cool. Nice one.
So they put my name on it, and they did it, and it's fantastic. Like, I gotta say that I have a rack here for recording. It's like right underneath here. Mm-hmm. And I used to have the RC and the AC here, the separate pedals, for years. And they sound great, but recently I was like, you know what, let me try to put my pedal instead, because I've been using that since it started. I've been using it since on all my boards and stuff. And I put it, and to me it sounds better, because I think there's something about the way they did it just sounds more pure, Okay. So I really like that pedal. It's called AC RC Oz, whatever.
Nice. I'll have to look up those. I got to say, Exotic makes some beautiful guitars as well, man. I've played some of their Stratocasters and just thought,
I have one of the guitars. Yeah, I have one of the guitars here. I use it on some tours, actually. I use it half a step down. It sounds really good.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Now, you said you got an HX effects as well, but you're not quite gelling with that. Or you're having a hard time with it.
The sound is great. Like, the sounds are fantastic, but I'm having a hard time. I don't know, like I'm just having a hard time getting into the. It's just a little uncomfortable for me to get into the programming part of it, you know. Uh-huh. And I had it for a while, and I work with it all the time, and it's fine, and it sounds great. But I don't know, the interface, you know, like when you have to get in and you touch certain things to get to the menus. I don't know. It's like it's not comfortable for me.
I have to agree. I've got one just behind me. Can I see it? Oh, yeah. Over there, right beside. That's one. Right there. You accidentally touch one of the buttons, and next thing, they're what were they called? The M13 and the M4s, and
I used the M13 and the M9 for years and years and years. I love those things, but they're bugging. They have a bug with foot switches, with expression pedals.
Oh, really?
Sometimes and I've done so many tours with them, and I would start playing a show, and suddenly my expression pedals don't work. So I have to go down on the pedal and start fucking around with it. And I call them so many times. They send me so many pedals. I probably had like 30 or 20 M9s and like I don't know how many M13s, because they at some point they break. They don't really break. They just have these problems. And so at some point, like the HX doesn't have any of those issues, you know. But there's something about the M9 or M13 that are so easy to access, and I miss that.
Mm. Well, on the box it says Bonehead Simple, and I got to agree, it is Bonehead Simple.
Yeah, you know, when you're playing live, you know, usually try not to touch anything, just set it up and that's it. But when you do recording sessions, you need really fast access all the time to stuff.
Yep.
And I had it in my rack for a minute, and I had to take it out. It's just like it's not like the fact that you have to go into menus to access the parameters was just too much, you know, for me. Mm-hmm. I still use it live all the time, and I still sometimes, there's certain sounds I can only get from the Line 6, like there's nothing else I can get it except with that. So this is kind of like my box of tricks. So when I have to, I plug it in for basic stuff, like basic delays and stuff. I use like Strymon and stuff like that, because, or Boss pedals that are my favorite, really. Just because the access, they sound good, and the access is so easy and fast, you know?
Yeah. Very opposite to us using the ADA and the Quadriverb back in the 90s,
oh my God, it was a nightmare.
Absolutely. Now, Oz, I had a bit of a listen to your album last night. Is it called Schizophrenic? Schizophrenic? Schizophrenic. Man, the grooves on that album.
Well, that's an old album. That's from I don't know. That's like 5 or 6 albums ago, I think.
Yeah. That was the first thing that came up on Spotify. No, actually, somebody posted a link. When I posted a link to us doing this today, somebody posted a link to it, and I clicked on that, and I had a listen and just went, wow, just the groove and man. So you've played with some serious cats over the years.
Yeah.
Who's the most standout musicians that you've played with? To you?
You know, I played with a lot of people, and I had a lot of people play on my records. I think, you know, I had a conversation about it with somebody yesterday. I don't play. I played with Vinny Colaiuta on and off for years, and he played on a bunch of my records, and I've done very few live gigs with him, but I've done some. And I gotta say, and to some degree, that he's probably the best player I've ever played with.
Yeah.
Because he's a real genius, and he's on that level. He's on the kind of level on drums of what like Herbie Hancock or Chick Corea is on piano. And I never played with either of those guys, but so Vinny in a way is like the best player I ever played with, you know what I mean? It's hard for me to say. You know, like I play with Dave Weckl regularly, and I actually played the best with Weckl. I played better with Weckl than with Vinny. But Vinny is such an extreme talent. It's just so freaky, you know? It's like a whole other level than anything you're used to. It's really extraordinary.
And in what way? What sets him apart from the other players?
I can't even explain it. He's a genius, like a real genius. Not taken from the fact that Weckel is a genius too, or Steve Ferroni for the same, conversation. Like, like playing with Steve Ferroni, he plays 2 and 4, and it sounds like the greatest thing you ever heard in your life. Like, actually, the drummer that is most comfortable for me to play with is Steve Ferroni. It's like magical,
Mm-hmm.
And he plays those really simple fills. Doesn't have any chops, but there's a reason why he played with Tom Petty for like 20-something years, and he played on gazillion records,
Yep.
I love drummers. I can talk about drummers for a long time. And of course, Keith Carlock is one of my favorites, and also Anton Fig in New York. Those are great guys that I played with here for a bazillion years, And then, of course, there's the jazz guys that I play with, like Jeff Tain Watts and, I don't know, Lenny White, Mike Clark, people like that. So, and then there's bass players. But with bass players, most of my bass players that I use in New York or most of my records are Will Lee, and James Venus. Those are my 2 favorites. I use Jimmy Haslip on a lot of tours. He's great. I use Patitucci on a bunch of stuff. On my last 2 records, I used Patitucci. And I played a bunch of jazz with him, too. So, and then I have all those guests on my records that I used to have Alan Toussaint play on my records, and he used to play with us live, too. I don't know. Chick Corea played on my record, and Chris Potter played on a bunch of stuff. I don't know. It's like I'm at this point where I don't, I like to. I know it's gonna sound very. I don't know. I don't want to sound like I'm above anybody, but I like to play with the originals. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I don't want to play with somebody that sounds like Vinnie Colaiuta, like sound like Chick Corea. I'm gonna call Chick Corea, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what interested me. It interested me. So. My luck is that I can get those guys normally, so I can call them, and I was able, I can get those guys to play. So
that's great. I have a bit of a saying when it comes to gear or just work ethic. There's no point fucking around, is what I say. And it sounds like that's what you're saying. Why get an imitation?
Plus, to me also, those guys kind of teach me and put me on a different level. Again, I've been playing with Dave Weckel for like over 10 years now, but playing with him is really a pretty intense experience,
Mm-hmm.
Like I got used to it, and we have a really strong thing going on, but it's pretty, it's pretty intense, and I like that. That's what gets me going, like I have to be on my toes, and I have to try to play as good as I can,
Cool. Who haven't you played with that you'd like to play with?
I never played with Steve Gadd. I've known Gadd for a bunch of years, a really nice guy and everything. I never played with Gadd. This is going to be pretty funny, but there's a bunch of jazz guys that are all New York guys or based kind of around the New York scene that I never able to play with. And I'm a huge fan of theirs, like Bill Stewart or like Brian Blade or like Eric Harlan and some of those guys, I call them to do stuff, but they're so busy, and I'm never able to play with those guys, So those are more of the guys that I'm interested in playing with, because I play with a lot of the other more like studio or like, guys. I got to think of who else. I don't know. Who else do I want to play with? I love to play with Marcus Miller.
Yeah?
Yeah, sure.
Cool.
I love to play with Herbie Hancock and Chick Corea, but,
Yeah.
Wayne Shorter.
Nice. Well, if any of those guys are watching, they might see the rerun of this and go, hey, Oz Noy wants to play with me. Let's get in touch.
I love Brett Melda. Brett Melda is also one of my... I'm more into the jazz guys, I got to be honest,
So... You said you're into the 90s, the 80s shred, etc. How did you get into the jazz side of things? Because that's something that's very foreign to me. I grew up...
Well, here's the thing. I always studied jazz and was playing jazz. The 80s thing was a period. After the 80s shred thing, I moved on to like Stevie Ray Vaughan and blues and Jeff Beck and Eric Johnson and those kind of things. the 80s shred was just when I was growing up. It was so exciting on guitar, you know?
Yeah.
But that kind of went over pretty quick. Jazz was always there since I started, and then I got pretty deep into it, and I studied bebop, and I had a big jazz guitar, and I was a Wes Montgomery clone for many years. Not many years, for a couple of years, and then I started, you know, I'm totally into that. You know, I'm more of a jazz player than a rock player, or definitely not a blues player, but, you know.
Yep.
Yeah.
How much guitar do you actually play when you're not doing sessions or playing with all these great players? Do you find much time to practice, or do you find you're just playing all the time with these guys and you don't need to practice?
Well, it's a good question, because now with the whole Corona thing, everything's upside down, so it's weird. It's I thought that now I'll have a lot more time to practice, but it's still, I'm having a hard time to find time to actually get focused and practice. I do practice. Mostly recently, I practice more classical guitar because I like that music, and I try to develop my finger picking.
Cool.
And then I do certain things, you know, but it's not consistent. I have plans to practice, and I have tons of stuff that I can practice, but it always kind of slips away. I don't know why. You know?
Yeah, sure. And you've done a fair bit of teaching over the years too?
I always teach. I don't teach like crazy, like a lot. I teach. People come to me pretty much from all over the world, and just kind of, they mostly take one lesson or a few, but it's been going on like that for years. You know, now when the whole Corona thing started, there was a whole online thing. Everybody suddenly wants online lessons, so I've done a lot of online lessons for a minute. Now it kind of slowed down, so I don't know. I just do it. You know, it's. I'm not one of those teachers that can keep you for like every week for, I don't know, for a year. I actually don't teach like that. I teach more concepts and ideas of how to practice. And, you know, it's really interesting, the teaching thing, because I say that 90% of the people that come to me are all in the same place where they want to play a certain way. They go, oh, we want to play like you, or you mix the jazz and the blues. But I don't really understand where it's really coming from and how to get there. And once I start showing them, I realize that their basic foundation is really weak. So I have to go back, and a lot of people just don't want to do the work, but it's just, there's no shortcuts in music, you know? So I remember pretty clearly that like when people used to come to my house for a lesson, within like 5 minutes, I can tell if the guy's going to get it or not. Like if it's going to be able to stick or not, you know? Because some people don't want they don't want to do the work. They just want to have fun, you know? Mm-hmm. Which is fine with me. But for that, I don't know if I'm the right teacher for that, you know? I don't teach licks, you know?
Sure.
So
I tend to agree with the not having to do lessons that go constantly. Like when I take a lesson with somebody, I'll get a bunch of information, and then I will process that for months, years even. I took an online lesson with a guy over here in Australia, James Norbert Ivanyi, and I had him as a guest. When was that? On Monday. And I said to him, I took one lesson with him about 2 years ago, and he taught me how he warms up in the morning, how he practices to get the dexterity in his fingers. And I learnt so much from that. And I still, when I pick up the guitar, will go through that routine, and it really improved my picking. If I had have gone weekly, I probably would have skipped over that and gone, okay, that was this week. Now we're moving on to something else. So I do get that, why people...
You know, I got to say, there's a lot of things I can talk about when it comes to teaching, because the whole YouTube phenomenon, I think, completely fucked up everything in terms of teaching, because everybody and their mother wants to make a little quick money on YouTube. So they become teachers, and most of the stuff on YouTube is awful. It's just really bad information. And a lot of people think they can get that and it's a shortcut, but that's not a shortcut. You don't really learn anything from it. If somebody teach you the lick from Hotel California, instead of you listen to the record and grabbing that lick and understanding what's going on, that ain't going to get you anywhere. So there's so much of that online now, and all this like online school and this and that, and a lot of it is awfully bad, you know? And it's like, again, I don't want to sound like I'm above anybody because, you can learn from a lot of people. And I look at a lot of that stuff sometimes just because I do get ideas sometimes. But I'm thinking of at some point just doing one of those kind of online guitar schools just because, I don't know, I think some of the stuff that I teach are more like concept and methods that can get you much further along not the right way, but in a way where you can really develop properly than all that crap that's on YouTube. So I don't know, I might do it at some point just because it's pretty painful for me to see sometimes what's going on. And the other thing is 90% of the students that come to me, 95%, they all do that stuff. And I go like, no, that ain't going to work, So it's like I see it in front of my face all the time. I even have people that finish like Berkeley and university that's come to me and I go like, what did you study for 4 years if you don't even know this or that,
Sure.
So it's weird. I don't know. Again, maybe I'm missing something, but.
Now you struck on something there when you said about listening to things yourself and working it out yourself. Now you can just Google or look at YouTube and people will show you how to play things. And I think people are missing out on developing their own style because of that, aren't they? Like when, as a kid...
It's not about developing your own style is a choice. You don't have to have your own style. You can just be a really great guitar player that plays great blues or rock, or you don't have to have your own style. It's nothing... Having your own style or your own sound it's great, but it's not something that you have to have. You can just be a good guitar player. It's fine, But I think you have to be able to understand the instrument and understand music, and like to understand how it works. And then you can come up with your own things, or you can have more control over the neck and you're more free,
Mm-hmm.
Then, again, looking at some guy on YouTube showing you a couple of bands or whatever, really, for that,
So Oz, seeing as you've played so much over the years, have you ever had any injuries from playing, like any issues with tendonitis or
not really, thank God, but only when I was a kid practicing a lot I got a little bit of it. But I remember, the one thing I remember is after that, every time I start to feel any pain, it doesn't matter, it could be in your neck, in your hand, and anywhere, I just stop.
Yep.
And that's it, because a lot of it happens from tense. If you're not relaxed, your body gets tense and then you get injured. So I'm aware of it. If I start to feel anything, even my back or something, I just stop, or I get up, or I move around. And the problem is sometimes when you do tours, when you do those tours that I do, if I do a tour with my trio and it's like a 3-week or a month tour, you play almost every night. And that's a lot of playing. So you feel your hands after a while. So you just have to rest when you're not playing, and that's it. And then sometimes you have to just, when you finish the tour, you have to just rest for a minute.
Sure.
I had one time, I remember a couple of years ago, I finished like some European tour and I came home and my hands were a little hurting. But I did some acupuncture and, I don't know, soaked my hands with water. It was fine.
Yep.
You just have to be very aware of it. If there's any pain or any stiffness, you have to stop and figure out what's going on. Because if you keep going, that's how you get injured.
Sure. How about your hearing? Have you worn earplugs over the years? Do you wear in-ear monitors when you're playing live?
I wore in-ear monitors when I've done this 1 or 2 pop tours. I hate it. It's freaking awful, but it's comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. I play pretty loud, but not crazy loud. And I have a thing. If it gets too loud, my ear starts to get freaked out, and then I know it's too loud, then I either turn down or I put earplugs. But I only put earplugs when I get to that point, because it's really hard to play with earplugs. It's like playing underwater,
Yeah, absolutely. I can relate to that. But has your hearing suffered at all? Have you had your hearing tested over the years?
I've done some hearing tests over the years. I've done a bunch. you know, it's. I think it went down as much as it goes down with anybody in the 21st century. You know what I mean? Like you lose some highs because things are loud and it's very brittle sounding. I think it's okay.
Yeah, you're lucky.
Some stuff actually comes back. You know, comes up and down.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah.
I have the tinnitus pretty bad, particularly in my left ear.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it comes and goes. When I talk about it, is the worst because you start thinking about it. And you go, oh shit, there it is. Yeah, yeah.
Look, you know, I when I do my electric band, my trio, then it can get loud. And I, over the years, especially lately, I've been trying to get it to turn down, but it's really hard because the nature of the music is kind of hitting, and then to get a guitar tone with amps, you have to turn up a little bit, and you know. But I try to keep it reasonable, because if I don't, then I start suffering. So it's
Sure.
you know.
Yep. Now you said that the album that I mentioned I listened to last night was about 5 or 6 albums ago. How many albums do you have?
Well, I have 9 solo albums and 1 album that is the side project with actually the guy from Australia with Ray Thistlethwaite. So I have a band called Oz Noy. It's kind of a side project with Ray, and that's one record that we did a couple of years ago. And then I have 9 solo albums. I have a 10 solo album that's coming out in a couple of months. So basically 10 albums.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I think Schizophrenic was number 4. Number 4.
Okay. Now, you mentioned Ray Thistlethwaite.
Yeah.
He's known in Australia as the lead singer of Thirsty Merc, which is kind of a pop band. But what a lot of people don't realise is that all the guys in that band are amazing jazz musicians.
Sure.
And, if anyone was to look him up on YouTube, you'll find him playing jazz piano. Any of those guys in that band, it's really surprising. Where's the best place that people can get your albums?
I don't know, anywhere they can get music.
Yeah. Do you sell them on your website or anything like that?
I don't sell them. No, I sell, like iTunes or all that kind of stuff, or Amazon, or Abstract Logic. Is most of my records are on Abstract Logic, so that's the record company. I'm not a big. They're on streaming too, but I'm a little. That streaming thing is pretty messed up. So I have most of my record on streaming. Like if I release a new record, usually I don't release it on streaming right away.
Okay.
But because it's really messed up. It's like you put it on streaming, the next thing you know, it's on YouTube, and then it's like you made a free record for everybody to just, But you can hear my records everywhere. Cool. Apple Music, I don't know, Spotify, all that evil shit.
It's amazing, isn't it? Like how little musicians see for their efforts now with the whole streaming service.
It's a crime.
It is, absolutely. And I've seen some pretty big names going to into the courts to bring up, hey, I used to make this much. Now I've had 7 million streams and it barely pays the rent.
It's a real problem. It's something that if there's not going to be a solution to that at some point soon, I think a lot of music would not be able to happen anymore. Like a lot of records would not be able to be recorded anymore, and it's just not going to happen like we used to.
Well, when you look at modern music now, it's like people have one song on the radio and then they're gone. There's no such thing as artist development. They can't make enough money that, okay, I've had this hit song. Now I can sit at home and actually practice the art of writing a good fucking song. And there's no more, Billy Joel's or, just Tom Petty, the great songwriters. It's just not a thing anymore. These guys are having a minor hit, or a major hit, but a year or two later, they're working at the supermarket because it's
it's very, very problematic. Even professional songwriters are having a hard time now, and producers, because there's just no money in this business. And if there's no money, this business is not going to you have to, it costs money to make music. It costs money to make any kind of art. So if you don't have that money, that art's going to disappear. There's going to be old records that have happened, and there's going to be some records that are being made, but majority of the records are not going to happen at some point because they're becoming like vanity projects, like why would I want to put whatever 20 grand out of my own pocket because no record company is going to put money on a record and lose that money or barely making that money back, or I don't know. It's like if you tour enough, you can make money selling records, but even in tours, people buy those CDs as like more like a souvenir, you know what I mean? So the bottom line is you can't, if that model doesn't make money, then it's going to stop, So
Absolutely.
it's really tricky, and then think about it, like making a jazz record for 10 grand or 25 grand or whatever, that's one thing, but making a rock or a pop album in the studio, they used to have like $100,000 or $300,000 or $500,000, I don't know. Now, they have to make those records for like really low budgets because they can't, sell enough records to cover the cost,
Oz, I'm going to ask
from it,
I'm going to ask you about your string and pick choice. And while you're doing that, I'm going to scan through some of the questions. Folks, if you have questions for Oz, please drop them in the comments in the live chat now so I can go through them. But Oz, what are you using for strings and for picks?
My pick is this. It's a Dunlop 2 millimeters.
Yep.
Dunlop. It's a very heavy and thick. And strings are the W11s. That's it.
11s.
Yeah.
Wow. I had to recently drop down because I had some issues from overplaying.
Yeah.
And I've been a 10 kind of guy for a long time. I went down to 9s, and then somebody gave me a set of 8s to try, just like people used to use in the 70s. Yeah. And I thought they were going to sound terrible, but they sounded great. And it really took a lot of the tension out of playing. Anything I could think of, I could pretty much play without having to fight the string. Yeah. So 11s, man, with some of the chops that you have, you must have strong hands.
Not really. It's not, if you play my guitar, the tension is not that high. It kind of feels almost like 10s,
Really?
Yeah.
Cool.
You would be like, whoa, what is this? Every couple of years, I try to go down to 10s, and I last for 2 weeks, and then goes back up.
Yeah, why is that?
I don't know. I try to get back to 10 because I see so many great players getting great tones in 10 or with 10s, but I can't get my tone with 10s. I don't know. It's something about it. I don't know what it is. Every once in a while I do it. I go like, oh, fuck it. Let me put 10s on.
Sure.
And then I go back to 11s.
Okay, Oz, I'm just having a look at some of the questions here. Okay. Liam Keeney is asking, Oz, can you talk about your recent ear training with Doron?
Oh, yeah, Doron, yeah. Doron.
Yeah.
Well, I always wanted to do ear training and reading music, how do you call it, solfege, when you can kind of... I always wanted to do it, and I did it a little bit here in New York with a friend of mine, but it wasn't consistent. The thing is, you have to do it all the time, and I knew this guy in Israel. He's pretty amazing. That's what he does. He's a great guitar player, but he teaches in university. He teaches that. And I've done some stuff with him, and I called him. I was like, hey, man, because of the Corona thing, I got so much time now. I was like, hey, can you teach me? And he goes like, yeah, because he's like a professional teacher for that stuff. And it's been freaking great.
Cool.
Really, really highly recommended to do.
And is this pitch recognition or is this like frequency recognition?
No, it's like recognizing chords, intervals, scales, looking at the music and be able to sing it or hear it.
Awesome.
It's really, I'll tell you a funny story. When I did the first lesson with him, he played those chords on the piano and I couldn't hear shit. I was like, and I felt so embarrassed. And he goes like, man, you play all this great stuff on the guitar and stuff. And and all this jazz stuff, but you can't hear this really simple stuff. I was like, oh, I guess not, because I never studied it. And I felt really horrible. And I went to one time, I go to Mike Stern, is a good friend of mine. I go to Stern's house to play. And I told him, I was like, hey, man, you know, I started to do this thing. And he played me all these chords, and I couldn't even hear the intervals and stuff. And Mike has an amazing ear. Like, he really hears stuff. You know, it's something that if you practice, it develops. And he told me a funny story. He told me that when he was playing with Miles Davis, one time Bill Evans was in a band, and Bill told Miles, like, Miles, check this shit out. And he played this really fancy chord, and he goes to Mike, to Stern, and he goes like, hey, Mike, what are the notes on that chord? So Mike figure out all the notes, and Miles' response was like, who gives a shit?
Classic.
So Mike says, like, don't worry about it. You hear what you hear. It's cool, you know?
Yeah, right. All right.
Yeah.
I've got another question here from Nicola. Oz, which funk guitar players would you recommend checking out?
I would recommend checking out certain, like, you know, James Brown is the Bible of that stuff. Earth, Wind, and Fire is great stuff. Prince is a great rhythm guitar player, Jesus. But, you know, there's a lot of records from, like, this, you know, like some of those early Michael Jackson records where Prince produced this great rhythm guitar stuff, some Chaka Khan, you know. That's the stuff that I'm into.
Cool.
Rhythm guitar.
And Cliff Gold wants to know, what's in the future for Oz musically?
I'm releasing another record. It was supposed to release in April, and then we pushed it to September, and now it's going to probably come out in November. But that's all I have right now, and now everything kind of stopped. So I don't know. I'm just waiting for this shit to come back to some kind of normality, and then I'll be back doing stuff like everybody's waiting, really.
Yeah.
But I have a record that's been done for a while, so to me, I can't really do anything until it gets released, you know.
It is interesting times. I've been making the most of it, mate, and just putting out some calls to people, see who's up for a chat. And
sure.
It's amazing who'll say yes if you ask nicely. And I want to thank you for taking the time and having a chat with me. It's been
awesome.
Great. Folks, if you've got any more questions, I'm going to round things up now. So speak now or forever hold your peace. And I'm just going to say, folks, if you've been watching my Chit Chats with Git Cat series, thank you so much. A like, a subscribe, and a share would go a long way. So please do so. And thanks. Let's all thank Oz for his time. And I will see you guys next time. Thank you again, Oz.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye, folks.